My name is Tracy Wise, and the PAD taught me how to live as a performer, as an artist, as a creative person in the world, and helped introduce the world to me.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the PAD podcast. My name is Rob Morgan. As you all know, I teach design at Washington University in St. Louis in the Performing Arts Department. Today's guest, I'm very excited to share with you an episode with Tracy Wise. Tracy Wise is an accomplished author, performer, even opera singer. Tracy has quite the international background. She was raised in multiple countries. She spent some time on an international floor in the residence halls here at WashU. Quite an eclectic and very interesting life and career, and I'm delighted to bring that to you. Her most recent book is Madame Sorel's Lodger, but she has announced the publication of her latest novel, Manufacturing a Duchess. As she writes, it is literary fiction, historical fiction, set in a Regency setting with actual romance in it. It comes out September 8th of this year from Type 18 Books. Do look for that, Manufacturing a Duchess by Tracy Wise. So with that, I will get to the interview. Enjoy. All right, my guest today on the PAD podcast, I'm very excited to welcome Tracy Wise. Tracy Wise is an alum of WashU in the Performing Arts Department, has led, I think, a very interesting life that I'd love for her to talk about and get into and share with you her story that, let's face it, developed into writing stories, which is what you do for a living. So thank you so much for being here, Tracy.
Oh, you are most welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you, Tracy, for being on the pod. So, as we like to typically, not that there's any kind of formula, and certainly not a formula that has worked over the years of doing this podcast, but we kind of like to start, from the beginning a bit. If you can kind of give us a synopsis of your life up to coming to WashU and what led you to become really an acclaimed author and speechwriter and a performer. You've done some opera. I mean, you've done it all. There's probably no corner of performing arts, the discipline, that you haven't touched. So anyway, if you wouldn't mind, if you just tell us a little about yourself.
Happy to. I hesitate to say acclaimed, yet to really be discovered.
Fair.
Okay. So my father worked for a U.S. nonprofit aid organization called CARE. And then he worked for an organization that provided the high protein grain blends that organizations like CARE would use in famine situations or flooding situations or war situations. So I spent the first 15 years of my life outside the US in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Turkey, India, Korea, and the Philippines.
Wow.
And I came to the States when I was 15, I came before the rest of my family. I spent one semester in Eureka, California. That was my introduction to American high schoolers. It's very exciting because I remember a story I read one day in Time magazine of what the American teenager was like, and I thought, wow, they seem really cool. And then I finished high school in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was very different. I mean, that first winter in Wisconsin, it was, looking at the thermometer was exciting, except for the cold was
Of
not that
course,
exciting.
of course, of course. Does that mean,
And
if I assume correctly, does that mean that you learned many languages early in life?
my first language was Sinhalese as much as it was English, but then
Wow.
we left and I forgot that. It's probably buried as some sort of Ur text underneath there. And then a lot of words and phrases in different languages, never becoming totally fluent. But at school in the Philippines, I started studying Spanish. And I've learned a little bit of French, a little bit of Italian. I'm better at speaking German than reading German. And I have taught myself some Scots Gaelic,
Nice.
which my brother tends to say, that's useful. But, if I have to flee to the Hebrides, I'm ready.
There you go. There you
So
go. Yes,
yeah.
yes. And spoiler alert, you ended up here at WashU getting a degree in both theater and Spanish. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a toss up between theater and Spanish and theater and anthropology. And
Oh,
because I decided to do my junior year abroad at East Anglia, which was unique at that time, I don't know if it still is, and British universities, British universities used to say that if you were going to study acting, you would go to RADA or Central. And if you would go to a university, you were going to study theater as a discipline and
Sure.
read plays and things. And East Anglia tried to blend the two in a very, as I look back on it, eccentric English way. And so I chose UEA. And so that meant, okay, I will go with that. And I had enough credit to do the Spanish and not enough credits to do the anthropology.
Got it.
So, yeah.
Interesting. So I'm very curious, like, how did WashU end up on your radar, being essentially a child of really international upbringing, let's say that. How did WashU in the middle of the Midwest, you know, for someone that maybe grew up in California but has been all over the world, how did we as an institution end up on your radar?
I think WashU must have written to me. And, and at that time, WashU, there was this competition for National Merit Scholars that was
Huh,
happening in universities across the US. And I had done well enough on the PSAT and then on the SAT.
got it.
So they came recruiting hard for me.
Sure,
Um,
as they
and
should.
and I had a really terrific interview on campus. What was interesting is my campus visit, we were staying in a hotel and we stepped onto an elevator and there was Gloria Steinem. So that I guess that
What?
was propitious.
Oh my
Yes.
God.
And we're all sort of struck dumb, but my father always, he had the presence of mind to ask because there was some sort of conference going on. How is your conference going? She said, "Oh, very well." And I remember my mother afterwards, she said, "I'm standing there with my kids wearing an old raincoat and thinking, have I betrayed the sisterhood?"
That's amazing. I love that story. I run
Yeah.
across stories of, you two played at Graham Chapel. Muhammad Ali, I read this morning, spoke at Graham Chapel. Jane Goodall was here not that long ago, before her passing. It's just incredible to hear some of these stories of like, oh, I bumped into, in your case, Gloria Steinem. Hello. That's amazing. So, yeah.
My senior year, my work study, finally, they gave me a backstage work study job.
Oh, yay.
And I got to be AD during Black History Month when James Baldwin was coming to speak.
Wow. Wow.
And James Baldwin was standing there and he looked at me and he said, "Do I have to go out there?" And I thought, "Oh my God, James Baldwin is actually talking to me." And and then I said, "I'm afraid you do, Mr. Baldwin." And he just went, and he opened the curtain and stepped out. So
So you ended up coming to WashU, and how was that, first year? What did you find in terms of your interest? Were you undeclared at that point? Take me a little bit through your first few, I guess, semesters here.
I very much knew I wanted to act, so I knew that was where my focus was going to be.
Yeah.
But I did all my distribution requirements. I was part of an experimental living situation, which was WashU started an international floor.
Oh,
And so that was perfect for me.
nice.
So it was, men and women on the same floor. But so my roommate for my first 2 years was from Pakistan. The last few years we dropped out of touch, but occasionally we get in touch with one another. And so that was important to me to have that connection.
Nice.
Um, and so living wise, yeah, that was
Yeah.
important to
It's
me.
nice that WashU, I mean, props to our residential folks who, work in university housing and that kind of thing, but they didn't sort of see you as essentially an American citizen, as someone who shouldn't be on the international floor, like that you had this opportunity to network with students and build community with international students. That's awesome.
Well, it was a blending of American and international
I
students.
see.
So they
On
really
purpose.
wanted, yes, yes.
Yeah. That's
So I was, yeah, happy to take advantage of that.
I read an excerpt of an interview you did where you were asked about your favorite smell. Can you talk about that and how that related to your roommate?
Oh, it was nighttime. It was heading into the end of the spring semester. And I was coming back late from a rehearsal, as I usually
Of
was.
course.
And I opened the door to my dorm room, and Asia had the windows open, and it was very humid. And she had some music playing from home. And I walked through the door, and suddenly I did not know when or where I was. I was completely confused. So it was the combination of the temperature and the sounds, and she had a candle lit. And yeah, I was completely unmoored in space and time. It took me, I don't know, it felt like forever to sort
I
of
love
figure
it.
out I'm in St. Louis. I'm in St. Louis.
But how nice that you had that experience. Prior to that moment, did you have any childhood experiences in Pakistan?
Yes, I had lived in Lahore from the age, well, when I first went to Pakistan, my mother was pregnant. A war broke out with India and Pakistan. So my mother and I were evacuated. But we
Wow.
did go back to Lahore several months later after my brother was born.
Hmm.
And so I remember preschool in our house and things like that. Yeah, going
Yeah.
to sit on Kim's gun,
Uh-huh.
Zamzama, and on the mall. And yeah, so
Wow. Wow.
yeah,
These I know that your life is I read in another interview where you said your life is sort of the raw material for your work, you know, that you've lived all over and you've had many stories and there's just one of them. And shout out to your former roommate Asya, is that right?
Asya,
Uh,
uh-huh.
if she's listening. I like to joke we have about four listeners to the podcast, so at least by my best attempts to understand how many people listen, I'm kidding, but thank you for sharing that story. That's kind of interesting to kind of walk into your dorm room and find a different culture and a different kind of ecosystem, really, to kind of experience while you're still here in very what is now very cold St. Louis.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So take me a little bit further. So during your time at WashU, did you said you were in rehearsal a lot? What were you doing? What were some of your sort of favorite memories of this department of the PAD or even extracurricularly?
Basically, apart from a Tai Chi class that met on Saturdays my first semester, I was able to do a special seminar my freshman first semester with Howard Nemerov,
Oh, wow.
which was kind of intimidating, but he had a very, very dry sense of humor. Very dry. I
Speaking
ran
of
into,
residence halls, there's a residence hall named for him now.
oh, how wonderful. How
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yes,
Yeah.
but go on, go on.
Yeah, I ran into him one time going up the steps into Holmes, and he looked at me and he said, "We must stop meeting like this." I was like, "Ah." I was like, "Yes, Professor Nemiroff." Anyway,
I love it.
so yeah, I mean, I spent most of my time in the performing arts department, both on Edison and in the drama studio, and taking classes or rehearsing. It was very much my environment. I remember one friend of mine from the department who was a couple years older than I, when I would see her walking between the South 40 and campus, she was always talking to herself, but what she was doing was memorizing.
Of
Her,
course.
her latest script. So I just say Christy and her memorization. So yeah, I was very, I think the first thing I did, the interim chair of the department, way he directed a production of Company.
Ah,
So I was in that and I sang in the pit as part of the vocal minority. The conductor for that, Jack, was actually, he ran the backstage at WashU,
oh.
but he had a music degree. So he was the conductor. So the vocal minority is all women. So we were very badly behaved. We one rehearsal we slipped a centerfold in between his pages, and
Oh no.
he did not drop a beat. I mean, when I say it, it was a literal thing.
The true
And then
professional.
at another rehearsal, we all put gaffer's tape under our noses to see if he would notice, and of course he didn't. But the costume mistress was watching the final dress up above, and she said, the lighting in this show is really weird because all those women in the pit have these odd shadows under their noses. So,
Nice.
and then I, as a freshman, was cast as the lead in Mr. Metz's The Mad Woman of Chaillot.
Oh, nice.
he said afterwards, he said, this freshman shows up to audition and I'm going to get this squeaky voice freshman. Okay, I suppose I have to listen to her. And then he ended up casting me. That was
Wow.
a marvelous experience. One of the marvelous memories from that was at the end of the play, there was a staircase going up, and then the staircase going down in the back, there was, it went lights out, right? It was totally dark.
Yeah.
And in those days, they didn't worry about putting a banister or something, a railing for me to hold
Oh,
on to.
oh no.
So, there's no time for my eyes to adjust. And I had to get down those stairs really fast. So I would stand at the top and just say, help. And all these arms from the cast would shoot up, and I would feel like, okay, if I fall, I've got all these people with their hands up in the air to catch me. And that just symbolized the
Yes.
feeling I had
Yeah.
of that.
I
Uh,
love it.
so,
I love it. A friend of mine would call this a true theater war story. That they were just, sometimes people are shocked at just how unsafe theater was and to an extent still is. But I had a professor who used to tell us stories about using powdered asbestos to thicken paint. We were like, what?
oh
What's
my
He's
goodness.
like, oh yeah, there were plumes of it. It was, you poured it in a big bucket, and we didn't know. We didn't know what was there was anything wrong with that. So that's incredible. So the late great Herb Metz directed you. That's incredible. I know our previous podcast guest Stephen Sater talked about how Professor Metz was a significant influence on him and his life. Also, an undergraduate degree in Spanish. So you graduated, and then what happened for you? What was a lot of students? I will, I guess, summarize that they see that post graduation as like a chasm. It's uncertain. It's unstructured. It's not. It's finally kind of leaving the academic nest for life. What was that like for you?
Well, I made the decision. I was done with school. I needed a break from school.
Sure.
And so I thought about, well, I auditioned for Rodden Central and they said no.
Hmm.
I tried for a Fulbright and it was no because I
Oh.
wanted to do theater. And so one of my Spanish professors, Profe Garganigo, said he had all these connections with a Latin American and Spanish, South American theater. And in New York, he said, if you decide to go to New York, I will give you, contacts to reach out to. And
Sure.
I decided, you know what, I wanted to go to family. So I'd go to LA and I told him, and he said, oh, thank God. So, so
Yeah.
I went to LA because I'd taken a lot of piano lessons over the years. I was a very fast typist. In fact, I had this old manual typewriter that I typed my essays in
Yeah.
on, and people would stand in the door of my dorm room to watch me type because
Oh,
I was free entertainment. Watch
that's
Tracy
hilarious.
type. So I did legal word processing and I auditioned and I took acting for the camera classes with someone named Tony Barr, who was a WashU graduate.
Hmm.
He led a couple of classes, special classes at WashU, and I got introduced to him. And so I took acting classes and I continued with my voice training.
Hmm.
And then I reached a point where I felt like I was being pulled in so many different directions. What could I walk away and get rid of? And I found the thing I didn't want to walk away from was my vocal training. So my parents said, well, this is how we can help you. We're living in Kansas City now. We can give you a place to live. We will not charge you rent as long as you are really serious about this. So you only have to get a part-time job and you can spend the rest of your time studying voice. So I went and did that for a few years, and I was an opera apprentice in Des Moines, and I was with Ohio Light Opera. And then at one of the auditions I did in Chicago, I heard about something called the Kansas Cultural Trust, which was a an arts organization funded by the Koch family,
Oh,
interesting
I see.
enough.
Sure.
And what their aim was to help performers of whatever stripe make the next stage in their professional journey. So I designed a grant to do an audition tour, a 3-month audition tour in Europe. I raised funds to be at Graz for the singing of the opera and a leader summer program there. And so I got the grant and I did a 3-month audition tour in Europe and I ended up being hired by the German production of Phantom of the Opera.
Oh my gosh.
So the cast there was filled with disgruntled opera singers, a number of whom thought they were all slumming. I remember this one performance on stage. This one young German cast member was, she was really frustrated and she said, "Oh, we're talking in German sotto voce. Good thing neither of us were mic'd that night." Um, and she's like, "Oh, I should have taken that fest job somewhere else." And I'd had enough of it. So I told her in German that, you know, most Americans cannot support themselves as performers.
Hmm.
And she was being very well paid. She was on the second largest stage in Europe. She was standing there in a beautiful costume in front of like 2,000 people.
Yeah.
So just be appreciative.
Check yourself.
She was like, "Oh, she never did that to me again."
Nice. Well, good for you. I mean, what a an amazing story, to sort of find yourself in what at the time might have seemed like a dalliance and yet turned into an opera career, like legit opera career.
Yes.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you were, let's say are you in your 20s at this point that you're sort of on stage in Germany? Uh,
No, actually, I'd hit the age of 30.
okay, gotcha. And then what happened for you? Then how long were you with Phantom?
So I was with Phantom 1.5 contracts. So that
Wow.
was 18 months.
Wow.
And then I figured I'd had about enough of that. Really, I didn't really want to live in the former Eastern Germany. And so I was not sure what to do next. And I knew if I came back to the States, it would be back to maybe I'd get 1 or 2 jobs a year. And then and I decided I
Right.
didn't want to do that. So my brother was in academia and he said, "Well, why don't you think about a master's degree? What are you interested in? You're over in Europe." So I ended up getting a master's in what was formerly ALLY, cultural studies, but at the University of East London, it was a historiography degree.
Right.
So we spent 2 years just deep in the all the theories, but our case study on how history is put together was the Holocaust. So,
Wow.
that was intense.
Hmm.
But my dissertation, I focused on post-colonial studies because that is what my life had been. So I was able to do my research at the British Library and produce my dissertation, but I was unable to get funding to do my PhD there. So I came back to the States and thought I would work in academic publishing and ended up being hired by Duke University Press as the assistant to a man by the name of Stanley Fish,
Right.
an enfant terrible of of letters. And so I entered the pantheon of Stanley assistants. We are, I don't know how long our trail is, but we have all been branded.
I see.
And so I worked with him at Duke, and then he was hired to be dean at the University of Illinois at Chicago.
Hmm.
And in typical Stanley fashion, he's like, "Oh, you're single, you don't have kids. Just come to Chicago." And I said, "I just moved to Durham, North Carolina." But anyway, I ended up in Chicago and I worked for him for another 18 months. Then I worked for his senior associate dean who handled the budget and finance for the university. And then I worked for vice provost who did that
Hmm.
for the entire university. And then I became an assistant to the president at Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin, which had a conservatory of music, and eventually her chief of staff. And then my father became ill. He developed ALS and passed away.
Oh,
And my mother did not want to go back to the Midwest. She was home in California and did not want to leave.
yeah.
So I moved out to California and looked for work up and down the coast and received an offer from Cal State San Bernardino as the executive assistant to the president.
Wow.
His name was Al Carnig. And then after he retired, I remained with his successor, who eventually made me his chief of staff. And I did that until I took early retirement so I could take care of my mother through her dementia. And that
Oh,
finally gave me the opportunity to get to my own writing.
yeah. Yeah.
So,
Wow,
yeah.
what an incredible story. So so you're now based in Southern California, and so tell me a little bit about you just published a novella, Madame Sorrel's Lodger. Do I have that right?
Yeah. Madame Sorrells. Yes. Yes.
Sorrel's. I knew I was going to say it wrong. Um, so tell me a little bit about this is your first, if I'm not mistaken, publication or published book.
Yes. It's my first published book.
Well,
So
congratulations.
thank you. It's published by a small independent traditional press that is women owned in Southern California, it turns out. And the first draft was done in 2017. And then I started the process of pitching to agents and, attending conferences. And I will provide this as a prime example of how my theater training and auditioning skills helped
Yes, this was just going to be my
because,
next question anyway.
right. So when COVID hit in particular, a lot of these conferences where you could pay for 10 minutes with an agent were in
hmm
person, but they shifted to virtual. So I had my query letter and what I wanted to say, but I would be face to face and I would do my little spiel and they would ask questions and it was like a 10-minute improv,
hmm
right? So I'm able to shift based on how they're reacting. I could tweak the way I was saying things. And oh, so the next time I do this pitch for someone, I will do this differently. And so nothing is ever lost. And you find yourself using it in
Yeah,
unexpected
of
situations.
course. Yes, yeah. There's a lot of
So,
skills. I think improv. I often think of teaching as improv. I do
yes.
not, and I've seen some faculty read straight from a piece of paper, and I can't think of anything more boring. So, for me, I'm a visual person, and
Mm-hmm.
my slide presentation, whatever it ends up being, it is my reminder of what to say. And so that, there's very few words on anything I put on screen. It's mostly my trigger to say, oh, this is where I want to talk about this point. And so I find that that's also improv. I think the department teaches students to think on their feet, be present, and
Mm-hmm.
with someone in a conversation, much like this one. So I'm really, I guess, heartened to hear that you kind of lean a little bit onto your background in performing arts, even in your everyday life, even as an
Oh,
as an author, which I suppose a layman might not think has any performing in it, but it does.
well, I read the audiobook. I wanted to do my own audiobook.
Yeah,
To me, speech is another form of music. And so I write for things to be read out loud.
yeah,
So as when you're writing on the page, it's your chance to be a conductor, but you don't have the same symbols to use. You just have the sounds of the words or the length of the sentences or the phrases. And so writing is also conducting. And how do you
yes.
put those things in there? So actually I got in trouble one time for when I was doing my acting for the camera class. When the teacher said to me after we filmed a scene, he just said, "Tracy, stop singing." I was not literally singing, but I guess I was looking for the rhythm in the words. And
Yeah.
this is one thing I found that my theatrical education at WashU was not so helpful,
hmm
which was all the training we received was from really good theatrical writing. And really good theatrical writing, you start reading it and it's all there for you in the text. But you come out to LA and you're doing a cold reading workshop or something, and they hand you, I'm going to date myself, a scene from Airwolf.
Oh, I remember that show. Yes.
Yeah. And there is nothing in that script for you to use. I mean,
Uh,
there is negative nothing.
yeah.
And being confronted with that, I did not have the tools. I was like, crap, what is this? What do I do? And, that's why people end up, I guess, when they say be yourself, well, if you're working with scripts like that, which,
Yes.
a lot of standard TV can be,
Right.
that is all you have to work with. So I was not really crazy about that. I had a casting director say to me, "Oh, you've had a lot of theater training, haven't you?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Be careful. Directors don't like that." I thought, what the?
Really?
Now, again, that is back in the mid to late 80s.
I get it.
So,
I get
yeah, yeah. But
it.
I mean, I guess with a script like Airwolf, if you are trying
Yeah.
to read it dramatically, it's
Sure.
not going to go.
Sure, sure. So you have connections. You have read the Airwolf script or a script for Airwolf? Is that your
It's
connection to Airwolf?
yeah, it was this what they call the sides.
Yes,
Which,
yes.
yes, yeah, yeah. So I've read a
Yeah.
side from Airwolf. Apparently,
Oh,
that casting director had access to the scripts. Maybe she
I
was
love it. I
casting for
love it.
that. But anyway,
I have
yeah.
my own little mini Airwolf story very quickly. When I was so I was a big fan of the show. It starred Jan Michael Vincent and Ernest
Yes.
Borgnine, and it was about a really badass helicopter that would do what badass helicopters do. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And so I was a big fan of the show. And then one day, fast forward, I'm in graduate school, and I'm meeting with a mentor, a terrific actor named Randy Reinholz, and I'm in his office, and I turn to the right, and I see on his desk is a picture of an actress named Jean Bruce Scott, who was on that show. And I looked at it and I remembered, I was like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, your wife, is that your wife? And he's like, yeah. And I said, your wife was an Airwolf. And he said, yes, she was. And I'm like, oh my God, I was a huge fan. So that's how Airwolf connects to my to my life. I have that story of like being stunned. I don't know why that he would have in my mind a very very famous actress wife, but. Anyway, I want to ask you a little bit, if you'll indulge me. I teach a class on creativity, and so I'm always, since watching, may he rest in peace now, Frank Gehry, a very famous documentary he wrote or did with Sidney Pollack. He did a documentary called The
Okay.
Sketches of Frank Gehry. And I remember watching that and being really, I guess, comforted to know that every artist sort of feels a sense of anxiety at the blank page, or in my case, empty model box, And
Uh-huh.
so I'm fascinated by the creative process across disciplines. In this class I teach here at WashU to 80 first-year students every year delves into this a little bit. So I was struck by an answer to a question you had about your writing process. And you said, I tend to start writing and see if the story continues to call me forward. And I find that there's not. I think people might think that there's like an outline or a draft, or there's some sense of like a plan, and yet I think true artists kind of go with the flow. And maybe that's a sort of a cliche term, but can you talk a little bit about your process as a writer?
Yeah, I've learned that there are writers tend to fall into one of two groups, being very reductive. Some like to plan everything out, and there are others that do what they call pantsing, as in the seat of their pants.
Oh, I get it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So
I was waiting for you to define that.
and I guess I'm more of a pantser. I think I have an overall sense of where it's going, but whether there's something there. I mean, when I first wrote Madame Sorel's Lodger as a short story, and I thought that was what it was going to be. But the next day I was sitting down to write something else, and it was like, oh, there's this other scene that wants to come out and play. So, okay, I'll write that. Oh, there's another scene that wants to come out. And because in my first draft, what was my final chapter actually was my first, and then I kind of went back to the beginning and worked through to the end again and filled out the end a little bit more. My publisher, when she was editing, said, I think we can get rid of the end at the beginning. But that's sort of how I prefer to work. I mean, I do have an overall sense, but how am I going to get there?
Hmm.
Um, I want to, I find if you're being so prescriptive about it, then that becomes the editing side of your head. And once you're in the editing side of your head, then that makes the creative side shut up.
Yes. Yeah.
And you can't be in the moment and in the flow.
Hmm.
And being in the moment and in the flow, writing is similar to singing when your voice is really in the right place and your entire body is vibrating to the tones, which just feels incredible.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to really describe it to someone who's never kind of experienced it, but all I say is it feels incredible. Well, this is the equivalent for writing, I
I love
think.
it. Oh, it's
Yeah.
fascinating. I mean, it really is like you're in the flow channel. It's just sort of
Yeah.
happening, and it's something we talk about in the creativity class. And I find that just fascinating to hear because there are times when I know something's not working, and whether it be in my case, set design, and I know it's not working, and I'm just not responding. I'm just editing in my head, and then I just have to, I don't know, walk away from it in a sense and come back when I don't know, the stars seem to be aligned. And for me to go, oh, of course, the answer or the solution is right in front of me for this problem that just bedeviled me before this. And I find that really fascinating. So, thank you for that. I remember Elizabeth Gilbert, fellow author, Elizabeth Gilbert
Mhm.
did a TED Talk some years ago and talked about how this idea of these ideas find you and that they're not just something you generate. They find you, and sometimes they find you at the wrong time. And she tells the story of, I believe it was Tom Waits was driving in LA, and he was had an idea come to him, and he actually spoke to it, and he said, "I don't have time for you right now. If you want me to have time for you, come back another time. And otherwise, go find another musician." I find that really interesting to kind of address this idea that, ideas find you sometimes, and sometimes it's not the right time for you to treat it with the reverence that it demands, I guess. But
Mhm.
there's also a great Leonard Cohen quote about, he said in an interview, if I knew where the good songs came from, I'd go there more often. This has just been fascinating. Congrats to you. How is the book doing? I know it was released last February. Do I have that
Yeah, it
correct?
was February 2025.
Yeah,
It
and
is just, it's selling just steadily and quietly.
great.
One of my school friends who lives in Karachi now, she has a son in Chicago, so she asked him to buy a copy and send it to her. So there is one copy in Karachi. There are a couple copies in London. There are a couple copies in Melbourne.
Yeah,
So it's quietly international too. So
that's fantastic. You've led such an interesting life. I don't know if you have any reflections on your life in a sense that if I know I don't want to speak for you, but I know I would be terrible as like a widget maker for 35 years. That there's got to be these sort of ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys to a life for it to truly be a rich life. Would you say that about your time so far on this earth?
yeah, I
Small
mean,
question.
guess what I figured out that when people say what they want for their lives, my want has been I want to have an interesting life. And so somehow that is what I have pursued. So it hasn't been as focused, just one path that I've, let serendipity guide me. And as I said earlier, I think nothing is ever lost.
Hmm.
So I found that everything has built on everything else. I mean, one of the things that I miss most about acting is that when you're on stage, with another performer, you are, there's the verbal interaction, but there is that silent communication because you're constantly reading the other person and they're reading you. And that is so rich. And one of the hardest transitions to what I call civilian life is realizing that with most people that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But that skill is hugely important. Working as a chief of staff to a university president, being able to read other people and respond and react
Hmm.
is, I think it's a superpower.
Yeah.
So I am hugely appreciative for all of that training and experience just in that one particular thing. And
Yeah.
I am a firm advocate for the liberal arts because you're going to have to continue to grow and morph and shift over your life. And the liberal arts give you that training as opposed to a more, well, you're going to learn this particular skill and oops, that skill is now outdated. So now you're
Yeah.
going to have to go, you have the skill set to continue to grow as the world changes.
Oh, yes, yes. Sometimes my students, I have to say, they snap when they agree with something, and I don't want to do that because this is a podcast. I would have snapped through all of that because I really appreciate you saying that and this idea that we have to, as actors, as performers, have to think on our feet. We also have to think on our feet through the course of our lives. Like what I've had colleagues who are like, "How did you know that that was going to happen?" Not that I'm any kind of prophet, but I said, well, I kind of, my intuition was that they were saying X and I was saying, well, next after X is Y and Z. And so I kind of thought that's what would happen. And, that I believe it's that idea that when you read a play, when you see a play performed, that you're trying to figure out the motivations of characters. And we're living a real life of characters and motivations and university presidents in your case,
Uh-huh,
things
uh-huh.
like that, where you're like, where is this going next? So it's just been so delightful to chat with you. And I'm very, very grateful to you at a very early hour for you to kind of get up and spend an hour with me and contribute to this compendium of expertise that we now have 20 episodes plus now in the podcast. So thank you for reaching out and for offering to do that.
Oh, you are most welcome. As I said earlier, WashU means a great deal to me. I am so glad I chose WashU to be my university that I
Oh,
attended and have a great deal of pride in the education I received there. And, the performing arts department was a huge part of that. Herb Metz. So I'll just add, when I was there, you got sort of tagged. If you were sort of Hollis Houston or Diana, there was that kind of actor. I
okay.
was tagged as a Metzian
Oh, wow.
because he cast me as Mary Tyrone in Long Day's Journey into Night,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, so I was a Metzian. I was very fond of his partner, Dr. David Belmont from the classics department.
Mhm.
So David kind of in some ways adopted me. So that was a wonderful memory. And in fact, I was at an alumni event in Chicago and was able to go up to Harold Ramis and say thank you for what you wrote about Mr. Metz in the
Oh,
alumni. Yeah, I really
yeah.
appreciated that. So,
Yeah, wow. Wow.
yeah.
All legends you're talking about here. Yeah, this is amazing.
Yes.
And I think it's testament to the fact that it's more than anything else, the performing arts department is a family. And
Mhm.
anyone if you wanna audition for a show and find yourself, auditioning for more shows and being a Metzian, there's a place for you
Thank
in our
you.
in our department. So thank you so much for your time, Tracy.
You're most welcome.
All right, my thanks to Tracy Wise for joining the PAD podcast and for sharing her very international story. And thank you to our 4 listeners. Thank you for listening. Have a great rest of your day.